Resnick, a distinguished teacher of the ancient Bhakti Yoga tradition of India, has written and taught for over 40 years throughout the world. Most notably, he is the first Westerner in history to successfully translate and comment upon the canonical Bhagavata Purana from within the tradition. Dr. Resnick received his PhD in Sanskrit and Indian Studies from Harvard University. As a visiting scholar at UCLA, the Graduate Theological Union, and the University of Florida, Dr. Resnick, or H.D.Goswami, is specialized in teaching the history of philosophy and religion within South Asia. He has also published articles with such institutions as Harvard, Columbia, and the University of California. Having lectured at leading universities throughout the United States, Europe, India, and South America, Dr. Resnick is sought after as a speaker for colleges, universities, divinity schools, civic groups, and religious organizations of all kinds. Fluent in 7 languages, that's English, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, French, German, and Sanskrit, Dr. Resnick recently completed translations of the first canto of the Bhagavata Purana. He is now working on a 3-part historical novel based on the great Indian epic, the Mahabharata, and has recently published a comprehensive guide to the Bhagavad Gita with literal translation. We are indeed very privileged to have Maharaj with us this morning and afternoon for him here in Houston. Please welcome him with a warm round of applause.
So, thank you. Thank you very much, Radhika Raman. I almost started to believe all that. So, should I begin now?
Yes, Maharaj. We will mute the microphone here so there's no disturbance. So you won't be able to hear audience laughter or responses. But hopefully you can see something of the audience here. We have devotees from all over North America present.
Okay, so just hold up a laugh sign so I'll know that you get my jokes. So we'll begin? Oh, I guess I will.
Yes. Yes, please.
First of all, I would like to thank you, Radhika Raman Prabhu and Hanumat Preshika Prabhu very much for kindly inviting me. And I would like to thank I would like to thank all the devotees there for attending. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita and also in the Bhagavatam often glorifies the Brahmins. Especially there's one chapter in the 10th canto where Krishna saves the former King Nriga, who was cursed to become a lizard because he offended a Brahmin. And in that particular chapter of the Bhagavatam, Krishna extensively glorifies the Brahmins and explains how absolutely essential they are in human society. So the educators of ISKCON are true Brahmins. And I just wanted to express that, how much I appreciate the service that you're doing, how important your service is. And according to Krishna himself. So, I made a few notes. I'm engaged right now in a sort of a particularly polemical period of my life, trying to argue in favor of certain things that I feel are absolutely essential for ISKCON, but I'll try to be nice here today. And I made a few notes. Basically, the things I want to talk about are the role of education in ISKCON, and of course we have to understand something about ISKCON and what ISKCON. I mean, we all know what ISKCON is in one sense, but what is ISKCON today? What is the role of education in ISKCON? And what should be the role of education in ISKCON? And how do you get from point A to point B? How does education become what it must be, what it's supposed to be, what Prabhupada wanted it to be in ISKCON? So, I'll begin. education, let's say understood as everything from K to PhD, education in ISKCON is, I think, dangerously underemphasized in ISKCON. I'm going to speak very straightforwardly because you're all adults. And I think ISKCON is dangerously undervalued in ISKCON. Not only in the sense that for every good school we probably have about 20 big temples or more. But also in the sense that knowledge itself, the importance of being a rational human being, the importance of being a rational Vaishnava, the importance of taking seriously Prabhupada's statement that we must have religion and philosophy together. All those things, I think, are somewhat in danger in ISKCON. So, I will trace what I think the roots are. I know that Yadunandana Swami, who spoke Thursday, unlike me, is a very nice person. And, Yadunandana Swami, he's a perfect gentleman and very humble. I can't really claim that I'm humble, but he made a lot of these points. I'm going to make some similar points about the undervaluing of education in ISKCON. I want to try to find out what the roots are. Like, where does this really come from? Why is this going on? Why does ISKCON build 20 or 30 big temples with elaborate, opulent rituals and worship for every school it builds? Even though Prabhupada said that he came to the West to put a head on the society, he came to recreate a class of Brahmins. As we know, the functions of Brahmins are yajan, yajan, patan, patan. They worship, they teach others to worship, they study, and they teach others to study and to learn. And we know also that of those two functions, the more important one is patan, patan, which is studying and teaching others. And so why is it that you could say the necessary but nonetheless secondary aspect of Brahminical activity has almost completely overwhelmed the more important aspect of Brahminical activity in ISKCON? And there are various reasons. If we analyze this from a socio-historical perspective, what's going on, I think it can be traced in one sense, this is not the only sense, but I think this is an important one, to a mythological and I would say ultimately irrational and radical division of the world. Sort of a radical dualism in ISKCON, which contrasts sacred India with the vulgar and profane West. Whoops. Maybe Krishna is just... Can you hear me again? I wonder what's going on. The internet. So, to all people in the conference there, sorry for the interruption, and also on Ustream. What I was saying is, I think part of the problem can be traced to a radical dualism in ISKCON, which I believe is in some ways, not in all ways perhaps, but in some ways irrational, mythological, and very dangerous. I can't see you, by the way. Is that intentional? Or... And thank you. That dualism is, that radical, I believe, irrational, mythological dualism is dividing the world in the most extreme way between a sacred part of the world, which is almost culturally infallible and perfect, which is India, and a sort of a vulgar, profane Western world. And understanding the almost the mission of the Hare Krishna movement, not as trying to present Krishna and the science of bhakti yoga to a fallen world, but trying to culturally colonize the Western world. and other parts of the world, that there's this battle between Indian culture, not Krishna consciousness, Indian culture. That's why I say it's irrational, because it doesn't really exist. That somehow there's this culture war going on, which between Indian culture and Western culture. For example, one ISKCON guru, very well-known ISKCON guru, just posted an article saying that in Delhi, in Delhi, that a sweet shop closed, and this sweet shop had been open for 225 years, and the owner explained that the reason the sweet shop closed is because people were now buying Western sweets like chocolate and pastries rather than traditional Indian sweets. And so this famous guru then declared that ISKCON should take up as a type of sacred mission propagating, as he put it, Vedic sweets. So the idea that there is such a thing as Vedic sweets, and that they are basically non-different from Indian sweets, even Indian sweets that didn't exist 150 years ago or even 30 years ago. So this mythological idea that with all of the massive Muslim influence, Scythian, Central Asian influence, Western influence, that somehow Hindu-Muslim ethnicity in India is basically as close as you can ever get in this universe, the spiritual world. And therefore, ISKCON is engaged not merely in trying to get everyone to chant Hare Krishna and love Krishna and understand Prabhupada as Krishna's pure devotee, but actually we are trying to re-ethnicize the world. We are trying to culturally colonize the United States, England, Germany, France, Australia, etc., etc., etc. Culturally colonize and take over. And that's what so how does this relate to education? It relates to education for the simple reason that one of the hallmarks of Western civilization at its best is rationalism. Now, there's a very common habit among certain people in ISKCON of comparing the absolute most glorious cultural features of India with the most disgusting, vulgar degradations of the West, as opposed to, anyway, you understand the point. So, I mean, when I started a program called Krishna West, some people were offended that I would connect those two words, Krishna and West. Some people actually thought that putting those two words together was offensive. Another very famous ISKCON guru, just a little YouTube video, which I'm in the process of writing a refutation for, and he said that all Western clothes are vulgar and just all about sex. In other words, right now I'm wearing a collar shirt, and this shirt is simply sex. This is nothing but sex. You can see it. I mean, it just reeks, it exudes passion, right? No, not really. But so part of Western culture is the importance of rational education. The importance of not merely learning the philosophy, but learning philosophy. The importance of training people to think independently. If you study the history of East and West, going back thousands of years, and it has been studied, you'll find that, although you could say the greatest things come from Bharatvarsha, but it was the West and not the East that placed a real value on training people to be independent, rational thinkers, to educate them in that way, rather than merely indoctrinate them. And so my thesis, right or wrong, but I believe it's right, is that part of the fact that, or part of the reason that education is so shockingly neglected, it's like the, how do you say it? It's almost like the neglected child of ISKCON. The reason that education is so underemphasized, undervalued, is precisely because it's all connected to this mythological view of Vedic culture, and there's not much role. Or education is not so important. You merely worship. You don't need to learn to think rationally. I think those things are actually connected. Another point I wanted to make is that what should ISKCON do? Even though it's so much fun to criticize, I will sort of renounce for the moment that pleasure and say something positive. So I see that education, there are some things which obviously we all know. We want devotees to learn about Krishna. We want devotees to learn a profession, become successful in the world for their own happiness, and also so that they can provide for their families. They can help to fund the Sankirtan movement. Not only fund it, but use their social influence, use their skills, their abilities, and so on. In many, many ways, devotees who are educated, who are successful in life, can do a lot for this movement. That's why when I took sannyas in 1972, Prabhupada told me that the students, university students, are our best clients, that they are the most important people to preach to because they can do something in the world. They're the future leaders. So it's very much in ISKCON's interest, although many people in ISKCON don't understand it's in their interest, to give tremendous importance and resources and attention and energy to educating devotees, especially our own children. Although it's amazing that, let's just call a spade a spade. The history of the Hare Krishna movement is that most devotees thought it was much more important to build bigger and more opulent temples for bigger and more elaborate rituals than it was to save our own children. Let's just, we're all adults. Let's just give things their real name and say what it really is. And so we have a cultural problem. It's a cultural problem in ISKCON. So one issue is that obviously in every possible way it's in ISKCON's interest to educate our members, to educate especially our children, to whom we have our first duty and obligation. And also, ISKCON desperately needs to create a class of public intellectuals. Public intellectuals, it's a class of people who are highly educated and deeply concerned about public issues. And I'm in Spain right now, and I was just speaking about this with some devotees. There is in the world today, there is in the Western world, and increasingly around the world, a conversation going on. There's an international conversation which is being conducted basically according to the ground rules and you could say that the social sciences and historical methodologies of the Western world. But it's a conversation about public interest. How do you stop war? Why is the Middle East generating unlimited trouble and suffering and mayhem and murder in the world? And how do we really once and for all settle the post-colonial problem? What is the role of religion in public life? For example, in France and in places like Morocco, there are programs, actually began in Morocco, there are programs requiring Muslim imams, people who have the legal right to preach in Muslim institutions. They are required, as like people in other institutions, rabbis and priests and so on, to take courses, to get a certain amount of education, and that education includes teaching about tolerance and respect for other religions and the values of the country you live in. The values of the country you live in, and how to respect those values, such as free speech, a Western value which allows us to have an international society for Krishna consciousness. So although some older devotees, even sannyasis, think that they see nothing but sex in the Western world, actually there are also human rights which make possible ISKCON. And so that conversation, which started in Morocco, the King of Morocco, and then it's now in France, and so that type of conversation, what is the role of religion? What is the role of spiritual leaders in the public life of a country? To what extent should spiritual leaders simply teach their doctrine? To what extent do they have an obligation to honor and respect the public values of the country they live in? To what extent do we do that? So these are conversations going on. And we should be participating in those conversations. Now, interfaith conferences are wonderful, and I participate in them, and it's a great service. But the people that participate in interfaith conferences, to some extent, talk to each other. And although there are ripple effects, to a great extent they talk to each other. Whereas there are other public conversations going on where you're really talking to the world. You're really talking to the world. And so we need to train public intellectuals, because without ISKCON education, basically we are just training people to give classes in temples, to preach to the already converted. Or we're training devotees, not everywhere. I don't mean to say that nothing good is happening anywhere. Let me put it this way. We have to be careful. We don't just train devotees to perpetuate our isolated, discourse, where the whole world is talking, everyone is talking to everybody else in the world. We are outside that conversation, and we have our own thing that we talk about, and no one is listening, or very few people are listening. In America, for example, among, you could say, native Western Americans, very few people are listening to us. I'm traveling around Europe right now. Very few people are listening to us. So I see the role of education as training devotees not to continue this basically futile attempt to get the whole world to come to us, but rather training and educating devotees so they can go to the world. And they can enter into the global conversations that are going on about war and peace and morality and spirituality and God and the soul, and how these interface with legislation and international treaties and so on. We need to go to the world, because the world's not coming to us. And that can never happen without education. So, maybe the last point I'll make, and then I don't know if we take questions in this program, but right now I am not aware of any major campaign in ISKCON to promote education. I'm not aware of any such campaign. I mean, I give donations from time to time, different gurukulas, and then for a year or two I get their digital newsletters. But the point is, there is a major cultural flaw in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and I hope, ISKCON is not going to be like the textbook example of the Sikh corporation. I hope it won't be that, where if there's a problem and someone points it out, the person that points it out is the problem. The problem's not the problem. The person that points it out is the problem. And so the simple fact is that the Brahmins, the educators are the Brahmins are the educators. I see that there's a desperate need for the Ministry of Education and all the educators to educate ISKCON. It's really not just about educating the kids, although that's extremely important, and there's no service in the world that's more important than educating our own children or educating, older devotees. It's probably the most important service in the world. But apart from that, we have to educate ISKCON, because ISKCON at this point doesn't get it. ISKCON as a society doesn't get it. That's why there's one North American GBC at your meeting right now. I think that kind of says it all. Prabhupada said that he came to America, he came to the West, to establish a Brahminical class, to reconstitute a Brahminical class, because modern society is a headless body. Well, as much as modern society is a headless body, ISKCON is a disembodied head. And the point is that I hate to put it in these terms. But I'm just going to say it. And the worst that can happen is that I'll get less donations this year. Raise your hand if you think that was funny. Okay, so
Laughter.
I mean, unless there is a major international campaign to explain to devotees that educating, enlightening devotees, training devotees to persuade the world to accept Krishna in an intelligent, relevant way is just as important as building another 500 temples where we display opulence and perform elaborate rituals. Unless we somehow convince ISKCON of that, they won't get it. Because the simple fact is that if you look at, and I'll be very blunt here, and I'm sure, some people will be appalled that I've reached, new levels of lowness or something in my public discourse. But the point is that the social body is like a pyramid, and the fewest number of people are the Brahmins, and then you get Kshatriyas, then you get Vaishyas and Shudras. And ISKCON, to a great extent, is a Vaishya and Shudra movement at the present time. Because for all the talk about we're saving the world, theoretically, and for all the talk, we're supposed to, but we're not exactly doing it, at least most of the world, we're not really saving right now. And so despite all the talk, education is not on top of ISKCON. Education, teaching, is not the most important program in ISKCON. And it's just not. It's just not. If you go to the Ministry of Education website and look up all the Gurukulas in the world, frankly, it is, make sure you have a little bottle of antidepressants next to you. Because it is actually shocking, outrageous, and almost literally unbelievable. It's almost unbelievable how little value is given in the so-called new Brahminical society to teaching. And so I think what I would suggest to you is that we desperately need a major international campaign, just like some people are traveling around with Lord Nityananda's his slippers or sandals, which which are used in ritual worship. There has to be an international campaign. If you, the Brahmins, don't convince ISKCON that it really needs to put the Brahminical class at the head of society, if we don't persuade them, who's going to persuade them? Who's going to teach them if the teachers don't teach them that? So I think that I would humbly request the Ministry of Education to figure out how to persuade ISKCON that Chaturvarnyam is actually important. And that education is not just sort of a little extra thing to make sure your kid doesn't become a drug addict or a Christian. That actually education is really the most important aspect of a spiritual movement. And there's a political reality of ISKCON. We may dream that we are governed by completely rational people that just, fairly come to decisions based on the evidence and what's right. But in the real world, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And so I think in the real world, there needs to be a major, major campaign to save ISKCON. Because all of this, ISKCON, it's just like Lord Chaitanya gave the example of a garden. You plant the devotional creeper, but then the weeds grow. And you have to periodically weed the garden. So gardens, fill up with weeds, not only individually, but also collectively. ISKCON as a society is also a type of devotional garden, and there are quite a few weeds in it right now. In the form of superstition, in the form of mythology. By that I don't mean Krishna's God, we're not the body, we're soul. None of that. Our basic Siddhanta is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a very frightening lack of Oh, for those on Ustream, another problem here. Oops. Is that all right? Hope I'm not... Sorry, for those of you who are watching on Ustream, we will be right back on the air as soon as we get back in touch with the devotees there in the conference.
You're back, Maharaj.
Yeah, okay. What I wanted to say is that societies... societies, not only individuals, can become filled with weeds. And weeds of superstition. There's a shocking type of ahistoricity among many sectors of ISKCON where people ignore real Vaishnava history and just make all kinds of claims about what is eternal and not, ignoring history, ignoring where things come from. And so there's just, education is so important. So that's my appeal to you. Someone has to organize a major international campaign to make clear to ISKCON that education has to be at the center of our movement. Because it absolutely is not at the present time. So, thank you very much. Hope I didn't depress anyone. But if you have any questions, do we do questions at this conference?
Thank you very much, Matt, for that wonderful presentation. So at this point, yes, we have about 15 minutes for questions. Whoever has questions, I'll just request them to come, or comments, I request them to come forward and speak in the microphone. So Maharaj can hear and so it can be recorded.
Maharaj, thank you very much. I have one question. If any, some of our actually, we have the Minister of Education here.
Yes.
We have the Executive Secretary for the Ministry of Education, and I was wondering if maybe they can make a few comments about your ideas like that. Okay, the one GBC Secretary is standing up. He's moving to the microphone, Maharaj. Watch out, the earth is shaking.
That's my old friend, Shesha.
Yes, okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. How are you?
Very well, nice to see you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hare Krishna.
I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. I recall several years ago when I was living in Los Angeles, you were there at that time too, and you started to get together a group of people that would be a think tank, almost like Rand Corporation or something like that. The idea of bringing some minds together to strategize. I think that may be one step in the direction of your saying of trying to convince the society of the importance of education, getting some good minds together and strategizing a step-by-step procedure. I had to leave LA shortly after that, so I don't know if that continued, your work continued in that regard, but I think your views are important for the future of our society, and I do believe that education can, play a factor in that, and I'll try to do what I can to help the society in that way. So I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you, Shesha Prabhu. Perhaps I would say to Shesha, perhaps you can reconstitute us and start as a group to figure out how we can convince ISKCON.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea. I mean, I can work on that to try to do that. Yeah, when you're back in America, maybe I can come and visit you, and we can talk about it and get a few heads together and see what we can do in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maharaj, this is, I think, this is the second North American conference on education, and it was 17 years before this. There had been nothing. Yeah. So actually, something really does seem to be happening with the dynamic. But I have one question. It's almost the same thing. Is that okay? We're all kind of behind your idea of spreading education within ISKCON and so forth and so on. Then what do you have some ideas about how then to do that? I mean, we should start a letter writing campaign, or what should we do?
I think we should. Well, that devotee to your right looks very intelligent.
He's my friend.
Yes.
He doesn't say much. He doesn't talk much, but he carries a big stick.
Well, I think, like Shesha Prabhu said, that we need to form some kind of committee. We need to come up with a campaign. Because ISKCON is so big right now, and it's so spread out all over the world. It's not like the old days. You actually need to organize an intelligent campaign to somehow other reach people. I mean, it has to be a determined, persistent, intelligent, attractive campaign. Education in ISKCON has to fight for its place. It's not that it's not that you're going to write a nice little proposal and present it to some administrators in ISKCON and they'll get it. I mean we have to, education has to fight for its place. And if education doesn't get its proper place in ISKCON yes.
Okay, so having a think tank, everything else. For example, like
yes.
What are you doing yourself? I know, for example, you're publishing some books and some literature like that. One question: what is the place of writing fictional stories which illustrate our points? Writing novels and things like that.
Well. With all due respect, I mean to everyone that I may offend, when Prabhupada said cultural conquest, I don't think it simply means bringing culture from another part of the world. I think it means also we have to create culture. We have to create great music, great literature. And it's just like, for example, if you open a restaurant in America, people have to like the food. You can't just...
Yeah, coming and going on the connection.
Okay. We have to create culture. We need great writers. We need great musical composers. We need people who are advanced in culture.
So what about producing a lot of novels, which actually, because it seems that people, Bhaktivedanta Thakur says everybody likes a new book, and there's so many books being published, everything else. So what about the area of writing fictional stories based upon scriptural bases like that?
Yeah, I just finished a novel. So, but again, it's part of a wider thing. We need culture. What? We need to produce culture. We need to encourage culture. We need to encourage the humanities. The humanities are not so strong in India, to be honest. I mean, the academic study of the humanities is more of obviously they teach that in India. Of course, they have good universities and they teach all that. But the humanities are really something which came out of the West. It came out of the Renaissance. And so when ISKCON radically denigrates and rejects Western civilization, part of what gets rejected is the humanities as something which is really important for ISKCON. And so I think there needs to be a flourishing, a flowering of the humanities in ISKCON, where we have great writers, we have great musical composers. That's
art, dance, music, poetry, literature, philosophy.
Yes. We need we
lost our connection.
Can you hear me now? Anyway, sorry for those on Ustream. You're having to.
Is there anybody else? Yes. We have some more people from the audience here with questions.
Yes.
Good morning, Maharaj.
Good morning. What's your name?
Pramohini.
Oh, Pramohini.
The right name.
From Mohini from Houston.
Hari,
Oh, Hare Krishna.
yes, Haribol Maharaj. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Congrats.
Yes.
Hare Krishna. Congratulations on your book, and thank you for releasing it, the commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. I just want to say that first. Maharaj, what I heard you say when you were speaking was that the world is having one conversation, and the devotees, sort of as a closed group, is having another conversation. So my question, if that's correct, my question is, how do you see developing an educated class of devotees will make a difference in the future? How will that look? Can you give us some tangible examples of what difference you foresee that making?
Okay. For example, if you're going to go preach in Germany, you have to speak Germany. If you're going to speak, preach in France, you have to know French. So that in that global conversation among public intellectuals, there is a cultural language. There are terms, there are issues, there are, what is considered reasonable, what is not considered reasonable. It's a question of understanding the proper way to bring in your sacred spiritual beliefs. You can bring them in. It's absolutely okay to bring in your spiritual beliefs, but there's a proper way to do it. And so we need to train devotees to speak the language of the global conversation going on among public intellectuals, rather than just training devotees to carry on our private conversation disconnected from the world that nobody's listening to, at least out in the West. And so that's what education means. We need to train a powerful class of public intellectuals. For example, in America, there are Christian groups who had a long-term strategy because they are active in legislation, they're active in political affairs, they're active in public issues. And so they began emphasizing that very bright young Christian students focus on debating clubs. And the result is that in the last many years, debating clubs from Christian schools, small Christian schools, are defeating Harvard and Yale and Berkeley and so on, and winning national debate contests. Because they understand the value of that. And of course, we're just teaching people to play the harmonium, which is a really nice instrument. I personally like to play the harmonium, but it's not going to, necessarily by itself change the world. So again, I think part of this radical, mythological, irrational repudiation of the Western world. The Western world is darkness, everything in India is light. Part of that is the rejection of the humanities, a rejection of the arts, of Western arts, and devotees who are simply unable to talk to anyone that's not inside of a yoga studio. And so I just got a note from Radhika Rahman. Let's see. My handler, he said. Let's see, what did he say? Call drop. We lost you. Please turn off your video. Okay. Bye-bye, cruel world. Okay, so if you can hear me now, that's why, I'm not plugging Krishna West, believe me, but that's why I chose that little symbol on our logo, which is sort of a Greek or Neo-Greek, like typical little building with the, the triangle on top and the pillars, because it is this, I was looking for a positive Western symbol. And that kind of architecture is found throughout the Western world for courthouses where they try to administer justice. Oops. Sorry, Ustream fans. Oh, for those of you who are still on Ustream, I hope you're having a good time despite all these technical problems. We keep losing the Skype connection, and we keep trying to get it back. So in the meantime, you could see if we can get it back now. Anyway, the point for Ustream, the point I was making is that the little Krishna West logo is often used in courthouses and libraries and universities. In other words, it's really a symbol of justice, of reason, of knowledge, and so on. And so it's an attempt to try to find the best of the West instead of always focusing on the worst in our classes and our preaching, always trying to show how the West is absolutely horrible and disgusting and everything in India is wonderful. Okay, maybe back on Skype now. Haribo?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, it might the connection might be a little stronger if we turn off video.
Okay.
Would you like to try that on your end?
Yeah.
So we just have a couple minutes left.
Okay.
But we have another question here.
Okay, can I just quickly finish just what I was saying? And sorry, Ustream.
Oh yes,
sorry for this repetition on Ustream. That you see, one of the principles that guide me is that you cannot simultaneously denigrate, insult, and despise a society and also attract it. And so it might be nice if we train devotees, educate them about all the best of Western culture, not just the worst. So you can give shocking Bhagavatam classes. In other words, it's not like one prominent leader of ISKCON just said that all Western clothes, like including like an organic cotton t-shirt, all Western clothes are just sex. Everything. Yogi, everything. There are no Western clothes that are decent. So this kind of consciousness, in order to participate, if we want to be respected, we have to respect. I think we have to teach our devotees to respect all the best of Western culture, not just to despise and denigrate it and then think you can attract it. So if we want to take part in the global conversation or the conversation in the Western world, we have to respect what is respectable, and of course doesn't mean we respect animal slaughter or sexual promiscuity. But there are many good people. I was with Prabhupada personally. When one devotee was telling Prabhupada how bad the Americans were, and Prabhupada stopped him and said, no, they're good people. They're just ignorant. You have to enlighten them. And so I think we need to teach our devotees to respect the societies they live in. Not blindly, not indiscriminately, but intelligently. Because in every society you will find the mode of goodness. Food, dress, music, dance, culture, and the mode of goodness. And we have to find that in every society we're in, and then teach people in that society how to approach Krishna through Shuddha Sattva, goodness offered to Krishna within their own society. We are not going to culturally colonize America. That is like clinically delusional. To think we're going to culturally colonize the United States or Spain or Germany. It's like seriously delusional. But what we can do is show them how they can learn to love Krishna by following Prabhupada within their culture, by taking the sattva guna elements of their culture and offering them to Krishna. So I think that's what education is about. We need to train devotees to be respectful, like Boy Scouts. That's one of the qualities of Boy Scouts, respectful. To respect, sincerely respect the society they're in, the good parts of it. To be grateful for all the good things in their society, to admire what is admirable. They're having a renaissance of preaching now in Israel, I mean, and I'm not taking the credit, but I kept talking to them. You cannot live in this country and just denigrate people or think that I'm not Israeli. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna called Arjuna Bharata. That's a nationality. Bharata is a nationality. Yadava is a nationality. Prabhupada said we should be famous as American Vaishnavas or, Spanish Vaishnavas, German Vaishnavas. But yes, in the highest sense, we're not this body. But if we're going to effectively work in the human society, we have to, if we don't respect, we will not be respected. If we denigrate, we will be denigrated. And so I think it's very important to train people, educate devotees, to go to the world because the world is not coming to us. To go to the world in Krishna consciousness with respect, as ladies and gentlemen, and persuade the world to accept Prabhupada and Krishna. That's what education is about.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Vedananda Maharaj?
Yes.
Yes, this is Gopi Gita from Dallas. Hare Krishna.
Hey Gopi Gita, how are you?
I'm doing very, very good. I wanted to thank you again for your donation that you give to us and you've given to us and your great support for all the devotees who are here. We are one of the schools that he has supported and he gets our digital newsletter every year. And so in addition to his support, he pushed us and instructed us to also reach out for the community support because that's kind of like a gift that keeps giving. And so I just wanted to take this moment to really thank you for that. And to update you a little bit on what we are doing in Dallas. You spoke about the need for a world conversation. And in our... Can you hear me, Maharaj?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Okay, you spoke about the need for world conversation, and in that, in our school, in addition to aligning the objectives with Krishna consciousness and like the Krishna conscious philosophy, we also try in our own humble way to push the children to see world events that are occurring at the same time and to actually actively participate. For example, we had an oceanography project where one of the seven-year-old students was so moved by the difficulty in the ocean, like the pollution, that he wrote a speech and posted it up, a speech against world pollution, ocean pollution. And then also, when the earthquake happened in Nepal, the children fundraised for it. Little things like this, we're trying to teach them to synergize, and this is their way of preaching, that they'll be successful in their careers going forward, but also to network with not just devotees, but people of their communities and the entire country. And so I just wanted to let you know that we are attempting to do that, and hearing your words reinforces to us how important it is. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Gopi Gita. Can I just add one thing? It was really great hearing from you again, and makes me want to give more to your school. But I would say, I think you're doing a great job, and the school in Dallas is doing a great job, and you deserve a lot of credit and admiration. I would say that you probably already do this, so I'm not saying you're not doing this, but it would be good to teach the devotees when they have issues like, for example, issues like ocean pollution. It'd be nice to train them to really admire a culture, in this case, America, or so many other countries, not just America, the fact that there are so many good people that are doing this, and that we care about the ocean, and it's great devotees get involved, but we also sincerely respect and admire those people who have created projects like this. And that it shows that, as Krishna says in the Gita, there are people in the mode of goodness. And that these people, if they could just understand that Krishna is really the source of the ocean. But that's good. You're doing a great job, and we'll talk.
Yes, that's very true. Like, for example, in the past, when you look at the TEKS, the Texas Knowledge and Skills, For geography, they align it with giving them information about the country and the heroes of the country. And for many years in Gurukul education, that has been kind of sideswept under the rug. It's not so important. But for the past few years, we have been identifying that as a priority in our schools to also teach them about the world that we live in. Now, I had a question for you. This problem that you identified of just a few schools in North America and around the world, this is something that really speaks true to those of us who are at the forefront of elementary education or high school education in ISKCON. What is your advice to those of us, of course, Hanumat Prashik Maharaj and Radhikaman Prabhu and the foundation here, they're doing a lot of work towards changing that. So that alarming, shocking information, how would you recommend somebody like myself or those of us that are in Dallas, how would we change that or affect some sort of change on the management of ISKCON level, like in a respectful fashion? What's your advice to what we can do to work to changing this?
Thank you, Gopi. I would say that you absolutely should be on the team. I mean, you personally, I think Dallas Gurukula, it's a beautiful story. It's, so many dedicated, wonderful devotees and children. I think that we all need to work together and either inspire, shame ISKCON into doing something. I mean, frankly, I'm not above shaming people. I mean, it's not the first choice, of course. But I think that we need to make publicity films about your school. We need to send people around to make films. We need to bring this everywhere to ISKCON because Brahmins, we need to... how can we establish a strong Brahmin class in the world unless we first establish an ISKCON? And the point is that ISKCON is becoming so big and sprawling, it's so diverse now, that it's not a community, it's a real society now with millions of members. And frankly, it's not obvious that we have a strong Brahminical class in ISKCON. We have great Brahmins, like yourself and so many others, but we don't have a strong Brahmin class in ISKCON. The Brahmins are more or less kind of almost like the employees of the managers. They're just like instruments of managerial policy, rather than having a truly strong Brahminical class. And so I think you, and of course my old friend and brother Shesha Prabhu, and there's so many powerful, just like you, Gopi Gita, when you're talking right now, I was thinking, boy, she's good. She's a smart girl, and she can really talk. And so I think, the Brahmins have Shakti. The Brahmins have Shakti, and so what we need to do is we need to mobilize. We can't just be the humble, frankly, just the humble kind of, people that run around and according to what the managers say. The Brahmins have to emerge as a powerful, articulate, influential class in ISKCON. Because right now, Prabhupada said in his, let's just be adults and speak the truth to each other. Prabhupada said in his last will and testament that the GBC is the ultimate managing authority of ISKCON. I completely accept that. The GBC is the legitimate system of government for ISKCON. It's obviously what Prabhupada wanted. The historical dangers of not doing it are frightening. So yeah, that's our system. And the current members of the GBC, however I may disagree with them on certain issues, as I do, they are the legitimate government of ISKCON. I do not question their legitimacy. However, according to Prabhupada's own definition, in his last will and testament, they are an administrative body. What ISKCON does not have, as frankly, a counterweight to the administrative body, is a powerful, articulate Brahmin class that teaches ISKCON what it needs to do in terms of education, in terms of speaking to the world, in terms of getting past, frankly, ethnic mythologies, and just, letting the world be comfortable with us. And so, it's not that, frankly, it's not that the Brahmins go to the administrators, the managers, and just, tell them will you allow us to do our duty? The Brahmins, I'm not preaching anarchy here. the managers established the laws of ISKCON. We are not anarchists, we're not, outlaws. We work within the laws of ISKCON established by the administration that Prabhupada established. However, the Brahmins need to have their own voice. The Brahmins need to speak directly to ISKCON, and tell ISKCON what it needs to do. And frankly, the way ISKCON works in the real world, and I've seen it because I was on the GBC for many decades, is that often when there is a public demand for something in ISKCON, and that public demand is reasonable and within Prabhupada's teachings, then the GBC has to honor that demand. If it's reasonable and within the principles of Prabhupada's teachings. And so, no, I don't believe it's just about going to the GBC. I believe it's about taking our case to the ISKCON public, to the Vaishnav public, convincing them, using the natural power that the Brahmins have, speaking reasonably, making the argument, persuading the devotees, and because the managers, and this is what I firmly believe, as a lifelong student of history, as a quote-unquote, this sounds like stupidly pretentious, but professionally trained historian, will the administrators just do everything? No, they won't. There has to be a powerful Brahmin class in ISKCON that makes the case, inspires the devotees, persuades the devotees, motivates them. 90% or more, probably 95% or more, of all the members of ISKCON do not live in temples, have their private lives, their families, their jobs, their houses, and their power to give to what they believe in. So it's not just like it used to be. I mean, what's that?
Sorry, Maharaj, I didn't mean to interrupt. This is Radhikaman. But now that I have interrupted, my apologies. Braja Bihari Prabhu is waiting online to
Braja Bihari.
For next speech. If it's okay, we can call it to a close here. The devotees, we would all, of course, love to continue in your association, but unfortunately time presses us on. So thank you. Let us all thank Kridananda Maharaj once more for his presentation.
Hey, so just one last question.
Thank you for that inspiring talk.
Yeah, one last. Yeah, that's what I do. Fiery talks. Hey, Gopi Gita, did you get it?
She says yes, she got it.
Okay. Well, anyway, my sincere thanks to you. All glories to the Vaishnav Brahmins and educators. And I hope that soon Shesha and I and Gopi Gita and everybody else can start to do something to fix this.
Hari Bol. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna, Hari Bol.
Thank you, Maharaj.